Hello and welcome to Uncanny Book Club. I'm Isaac Faderspiel, and joining me as always is my co-host Adam Ward.
That was a very odd way of saying my last name.
I thought you could use a few extra syllables and kind of a question mark.
Is that correct?
Is this Adam? Has he been replaced with AI? We may never know.
Not yet, anyways. Imagine being the person who sells your voice to an AI company, and then they
I think
own
most
your
AI
voice
companies
forever.
will just steal it.
No, 100%. But it is messed up. It's so personal
Didn't Scarlett
to you.
Johansson have to sue an
Yes.
AI company for stealing her voice?
There was some sort of dispute that took place between Scarlett and I think it was OpenAI.
That tracks. I can believe that.
Before we get into this set of three great issues, in my opinion, I think they're very, 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 very good. I don't know if you saw the news, but this week, as of the time we are recording this, they unveiled like this new line of horror-themed Marvel comics that are set in an alternate sort of like ultimate universe kind of thing situation, but it's called Midnight. And one of the series that's been announced is Midnight X-Men, with the general premise looking to be something involving like mutants and like vampires ruling New York City or something to that effect.
And mutant vampires, one presumes. But in the meantime, issue 171, Rogue.
Yeah, let's get it. It's clobbering time, baby.
The cover of issue 171 hits us with a welcome to the X-Men, Rogue. Hope you survive the experience. We then loop back a bit on where we left off, with Storm declaring herself the leader of the Morlocks and telling them to stop preying on surface people. Her and Callisto have a tense conversation, and Nightcrawler makes note of just how much Storm has changed lately. Meanwhile, in Alaska, Madelyne Pryor awakens from a nightmare of a plane crash, of which she was the sole survivor. She tells Scott about the ordeal, and he is stunned to realize that the crash happened the same day as Jean's death. Carol makes a quick visit to her home, but notes that since Rogue stole her memories, she doesn't have any emotional attachment to her parents. She flies off as binary. Kitty frantically searches her room for missing computer disks and blames the New Mutants. Illyana is annoyed and points out that they've been under her keyboard right where she left them. The professor is continuing his physical therapy, and Lilandra is beginning to wonder if there's a physiological reason for his inability to walk. Peter means to bake a quiche Lorraine when the professor alerts him to a visitor. He assumes an enemy approaches and whips the door of the mansion open to find Rogue. She seeks the X-Men's help. Everyone is quite hostile toward her besides the professor, who means to help. Rogue explains that her powers are out of control since absorbing Carol permanently. Eventually, Xavier kicks all the X-Men out so he can help Rogue. The team decides to take their frustration out in the danger room. Illyana loads a surprise program, bringing the likeness of Belasco's throne room to the danger room. Illyana reacts with shock and anguish to see Belasco, and something changes in her. Her eyes turn red, and she summons her soul sword, taking a swing at Kitty. Even though she is phasing, the sword still cuts her cheek. Kitty disarms her, and Illyana awakens from her state, crying and unsure of where she is. She breaks down in Kitty's arms, saying, "I saw Belasco. I remember." Storm spends some time in her loft, but loses control of her powers, destroying her plants. Xavier projects his talking head to her, summoning her back, and Aurora throws a knife at him, saying, "It is because of you that I became an X-Man, old man, and that decision is destroying me." Professor X only caught a flash of her emotions, but notes she's unusually disturbed. Charles informs the X-Men that he's decided to admit Rogue to the school as a probationary member, and as a probationary member of the X-Men. Storm, the leader of the X-Men, says she should have some say, and the two begin arguing. Carol happens to arrive at that moment, and upon seeing Rogue, punches her to the moon. Rogue loops back, but Carol hits her again, smashing her into a forest. Various members try to calm her, and Storm gives a sarcastic, The child repents, my friend, and has been forgiven. Behold, our newest X-Man. Carol storms off in anger. Storm says that she was right to leave and that the professor is right to admit Rogue. She walks into nature to make her own decision. Duty compels her to stay. She says whatever she chooses, she will no longer be the woman she was. The issue ends with her wondering what she will become, Aurora or Storm.
This was a strong issue to start off with, like right from the get, with this opening panel of Storm looking incredibly badass.
It is cool, but I do wonder if we really needed to loop back and spend like the few panels we do with like the Morlocks and kind of rehashing what we've been over, adding a little bit of new stuff. I do enjoy the little confrontation with Callisto and, her being like she grabs her by the face and then carries her like a little baby to really put her down. But I don't know. I'm not sure what else we would have replaced with it, but it does set the stage pretty good.
I think in some ways it's reflective of this different personality of Storm that's starting to manifest. And maybe they were looking at trying to just remind the reader that, hey, this is different. Look at how she's acting in this situation and taking command of this room and the Morlocks and really kind of drawing the parallel of being in command.
Speaking of reminding the reader, we finally loop back to the whole Storm is having weird wonky stuff going on with her powers. It feels like we didn't need to drop that for the previous two issues. That could have very easily continued, but I would say that over these three, we really dive in and make it a central theme at the very least. So it's nice to see them making that more concrete and making it a part of the story.
Thinking back on it, the situation, and I have a piece that I want to go over after we get through all these issues because, this will kind of transform into a pseudo sidekick story to what was happening in the Wolverine mini that was released at this time. Because our next issue, as we get into it, they're in Japan and Logan's getting married. Congratulations. And all that context is missing for how we get to this point. But I think we have a situation where she doesn't use her powers in this fight with Callisto. And I think that's done deliberately to just show Storm as being definitive in her decisions. She is stepping into a leadership role. And when we look at the dynamic of the team right now, and it's just Storm, right? Logan's gone. Cyclops is gone. And so Storm is alone as a leader for the very first time that we're seeing, right? Because even while Scott was away, Logan was around too. I think being more of like a helpful ear.
An advisor, someone to have as like a backup, someone you can rely on.
Exactly. She could rely on Wolverine to be there and assist her in making decisions. And so now she's alone. And we see this theme in this previous story with the Morlocks where she is having to confront a choice, as you've even just gone over, right? And we have Nightcrawler and Colossus openly questioning her ability to go through with this fight with Callisto, and she does it without hesitation. And I think that's the point that they're trying to make, is she's being very decisive in her choices. And that is a very different personality trait than we've seen from her, where maybe she's questioned her ability to lead. And now she doesn't have anybody else to lean on. And she is really looking to gain the respect of her teammates and to really take control of the destiny of this team. And we see that pushback here in this issue with this confrontation between Rogue and Charles. And Charles basically saying like, hey, didn't you tell me that Logan deserved to be here despite everything that's happened with him? Despite the questions that I had. Now, I will say the situation is very different between Wolverine, who was working as a secret agent, essentially, for the Canadian government before he was recruited by Xavier, comparing that to Rogue, who has been acting as a mutant terrorist and has directly had conflicts with this team, specifically with Storm. And the weight of those decisions, when you think back to that fight that took place at, it was the Pentagon, and that building getting destroyed, and all of that damage happens, and that kick-started a multiple series of events, which included an increase in mutant hate and propaganda about that. We know that there's the resetting of the Sentinel program, and we know that there's a lot of unresolved problems between Storm and those decisions that she made that day to confront the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And Charles has already judged her for that.
Was it him? I know Cyclops does.
It sounds very Charles-y to me.
I mean, maybe off panel at the very least.
But maybe you're right. Maybe it was Scott. But she's been ridiculed for it. So her leadership has been in question. And it continues to kind of be a theme. And here she is choosing to take a leadership role, right? She is choosing to defeat Callisto, take control and command this room of Morlocks, and basically prevent them from interfering with the surface world. You don't want to deal with them? Fine. You can be sewer people if that's what you want to be. But be peaceful and don't steal people and eat them or whatever other crazy shit you're doing.
Stripping them down and marrying them while they're unconscious.
Yeah, I'm not...
just Morlock stuff.
I'm not looking forward to the return of the Morlocks. I know it'll happen eventually.
So one thing that I felt like we were still missing, having gone through this, is in the prior issues, we saw Rogue being driven away, running away from Mystique and running toward the X-Men. We know that her powers are out of control, but it seemed like there was more to it last time. And, they were kind of teasing the mysterious laughing mystery man who we know is Jason or whatever, and him having to do with it. And I feel like where is that in this story? Like right now we just have like powers out of control, and I feel like we don't really have the whole story, do we?
No, definitely not. I feel like that entire thread, like the why of it all, like why are you here? Why are you asking Charles Xavier for help? And then Charles basically sits down in a room. We assume he does some sort of interviewing. He explains that he can't really read her mind because of the DNA or powers that she took from Carol, like has messed with it.
Like dual personalities or dual identities, like fighting within her, something like that too.
Yeah, some MacGuffin for why you can't read her mind. And comes out of that meeting just basically saying, okay, everybody. It all checks out. She's totally okay. And everything's on the up and up. She's not lying. She is legitimately scared.
He can probably get some
something.
basics. It's fine.
Maybe he hooked her up to an old school lie detector and was, doing that instead. Or maybe Lalandra had some sort of Shi'ar lie detector. But nonetheless.
Pretty sure a Shi'ar lie detector is just a baseball bat.
We'll beat you until you tell the truth. We know you're lying. Yeah, unfortunate that just kind of gets glossed over here. And the solution is just, it's all on the up and up. And now she's an X-Men. Temporarily, of course. She's on probation here. What's that?
Just like Kitty.
Get crazy. Yeah, poor Kitty. Does everything
Maybe they'll
right.
send her down to the New Mutants.
Yeah, the New Mutants should be
play
the
minor
feeder
league
team.
Superheroing.
They're the feeder team for the X-Men, Like you have to get your work in there and then get called up to the main roster. What did you think of the Madelyne and Scott situation where they're really kind of playing up the similarities between Jean and Madelyne beyond just the visual comparison of the two? Like that there was this plane crash that happened, and it happened at the exact same time as the Phoenix.
I liked the little check-in, just going off of this one issue versus the next two. It seems like we're really leaning into the whole Jean thing a little bit heavier. It seems like maybe at this time they've planned to establish or still mucking around with the idea of establishing a official connection between the two, or at least they want us to play around with that idea and make us think that like that's where this is going. I think over the 3 issues we get like a good little story going with them, but it's a little sparse in just this one issue. Like we just get the one little mini situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we'll see what happens. I think the reaction that everybody has eventually when they meet Madelyne for the first time, I think that's in the 3rd issue that we're going to talk about, but their reaction is all very, very funny and very appropriate because I felt like a lazy writer could have just, written it off and it wouldn't have mattered.
Wow, another redhead.
Damn, Scott, you got to type.
I appreciated how clear it was, just how little preparation for anything she would be likely to experience Scott gave her prior to, hopping on a plane, flying halfway around the world, meeting like his friends and family, basically. And she's just like stunned and just like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, here, hold this
Pull
bag.
this ripcord. I've
Here's
known this dude for half a week.
Also, I have to point out, when we first get into the situation with Madelyne and Scott in this issue, she's like waking up from a nightmare or something. But we see them in pajamas.
I'm looking at that right now too.
And it literally looks as though Madelyne is wearing the top half and Scott's wearing the bottom half.
I think that's what it is. I think it's one set of pajamas. She's
Split
got the
between
top
two
on,
people,
he's
yeah.
got the bottoms. It'd be improper to switch and have it the other way around.
Well, then you got to deal with the comic book code.
Oh, they would not be happy.
This would never have been released. We also see the X-Mansion get destroyed again, or at least part of it.
Minorly destroyed.
Minorly?
Well, I mean, they just blast a hole through the roof. That's not too bad. I mean, like, roofing is expensive, but look at how much mansion is still intact. Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Big house.
That does lead me into my next point, which is when you look at the scenario with Rogue and the fact that every person but Charles is upset about it, and Charles is just like, well, sucks to suck. One of the people who is done so dirty is Carol, who is like returning home after seeing her parents, feeling like no connection to them. You're emotionally taxed because of that. And then you go home to find the person who stole your powers just sitting in your living room.
And then all your memories.
And then find out that she is joining the X-Men as a member. After everything that you did with them in the Brood, and Charles doesn't even consider, at least, isn't really spoken about the impact his decision is going to have on the other members, nor considering what that would mean for the overall complexion of the team. Right. And it is alluded to. I believe it's Storm who says, like, how can we trust her? Like, how can we be an effective team if we can't trust her not to stab us in the back? Very valid. And it is like, thankfully, I appreciate that over these 3 issues, it's not something that's just immediately accepted by everybody. I think they accept that this is a ruling by Charles, and then they're very bitter about it and not necessarily accepting that this is happening, but they're forced to go along with it because they don't have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so them really kind of playing that up, we see that later on with Logan when he has to interact with her and doesn't shy away from how he feels. And he, of course, has the deep connection with Carol, being longtime friends, and also the confrontation with her at the Pentagon. So there's a lot of history, and Logan just can, he can take it and give it when it comes to like verbal jabs and combat, but he was not playing around with her this time, as we'll see. He shuts it down.
It's a complicated situation because, everyone's in the right for not wanting Rogue on the team. Professor X is also kind of in the right for, like, this is a person that needs help. His whole thing is helping people, helping mutants. She has evil mothers. She's probably she's a kid. She's probably like 19, like everyone else. So, like, she can turn it around. I think everybody is all right to feel how they feel in this situation. It's just, it's a big suck sandwich for Carol, though.
Yeah, especially Carol. She's certainly the loser of this situation versus, I think, anybody else. Is there anything else you wanted to cover, or shall we take a trip across the ocean to the bustling metropolis of Tokyo?
Let us take a flight to Tokyo.
Ooh, I've done that flight. It sucks.
Issue 172 takes us on a trip to Japan for the wedding of Lady Mariko of Clan Yoshida to Logan, no last name. The X-Men arrive and are greeted by the happy couple. Mariko asks if Logan will invite the last member of the team inside, and Rogue is eventually let in. We next see the Silver Samurai stalking the group, but there's another person stalking him. Yukio, the second figure, attacks the Silver Samurai, and Wolverine and Nightcrawler investigate the noise. A quick scuffle happens, but the Silver Samurai teleports away. Storm ends up catching Yukio after she slips and falls, and she's impressed by her crazy, carefree outlook on life. The X-Men gather up, and Storm says that she recognized the Silver Samurai and that he and his mistress Viper recently fought the New Mutants and killed their member Karma. Storm wonders if he's following the X-Men or out to get Logan, and Logan reveals that Mariko's father, Shingen, was involved in the criminal underworld, and he may have been working with Viper to expand his influence. Pete asks if Shingen can be stopped, and Logan says he already has. Kitty suggests questioning him in prison and then learns that Logan definitely killed Shingen. We see Mariko's thoughts. She says that Logan faced Shingen in single combat to the death in her stead, and that Shingen disgraced his family's name. She thinks that it falls on her to atone for her father's crimes and leaves the home. We then see Viper knocking out a member of the serving staff and taking her place. Logan notes that a member of the household staff that he doesn't know did the serving, but he doesn't find it that odd. He senses turmoil within Storm and brings her some tea. Logan says he feels like his situation is a dream. Shingen asked if he was worthy, and he says deep down he has his doubts. He also worried about the clan's involvement in criminal affairs due to him, and that it may be more extensive than Mariko thinks. Logan takes a sip of tea, but notices a strange aftertaste. Before Storm can take a drink, he slaps the cup out of her hands. Storm turns and sees all members of the X-Men are unconscious. We see Mariko enter a car, and Yukio is posing as its driver. Back in Alaska, Scott is digging through Madelyne's personnel file when Alex finds him. Alex tells him that Jean is dead, and Madelyne only bears an uncanny resemblance. Scott says he wants to believe that, but there are too many coincidences adding up. Alex wonders why he's trying to destroy what they have, and Scott says he needs to know the truth, whatever the cost. He reveals that Maddie was the sole survivor of a plane crash, not only on the same day Jean died, but the exact same time. Back in Tokyo, we see Mariko meeting with the Silver Samurai, Viper, and Nabatone Yukose, an arbitrator. Mariko says she acknowledges no authority save the Emperor, and their ruling means nothing. Silver Samurai says that he was Shingen's only son and that he was promised the clan. Mariko denies his claim, calling him a criminal who dishonored the family name. The Silver Samurai means to attack, and it's revealed that Mariko is actually Yukio in disguise, and she begins fighting the Silver Samurai. Viper looks for the real Mariko, but a gust of wind from Storm knocks her out. She goes to help Yukio, but loses control of her lightning. We see Nabatone thinking this is exactly what he wanted. Her strike is too deadly, and she instead pulls it back into herself. Explosions are set off, and Yukio ends up saving Storm, getting them out just in time. The two see a phoenix rising from the flames. Yukio is thrilled with their near-death escape, and Storm envies her madness. We see the Silver Samurai rising from the flames and declares that his death mark is upon Yukio and Storm. We then see Nabatone lurking in the shadows, watching the two shuffle off. Storm thinks she briefly hears laughter. The issue ends with Logan meaning to leave the hospital to stop the Silver Samurai. Rogue is the only other X-Men to recover, and he reluctantly lets her come along. Next issue, Tag, You're Dead.
Ooh boy, what an issue.
It is very dense in everything that's going on. You had to really pay attention to the plot instead of just kind of flipping through on this one. There's a lot going on.
It feels like an action movie. For what is ultimately going to be like 2 issues in this Pan storyline, that we're getting, right? As I mentioned earlier, this is like a spin-off of the Wolverine mini that largely
kind of a
takes place
continuation,
in Japan.
ending cap on that story.
Yes, because the last we heard, Logan was going to the Rocky Mountains. And here he is in Japan now, which we later found out a few issues ago that he was there now, but it's never explained.
These things happen.
Anywho, this is from the start, I think, super strong. We have like an awesome sequence with Logan where he jumps after telling Nightcrawler to bamf him towards the Silver Samurai, and he's just like flying through the air with his claws out. It's so dynamic.
Shirtless.
It's so much fun. The action sequences are well thought out and penciled and colored. It's like watching the movie The Wolverine is what it felt like.
Been a while since I've gone back to that one.
I think I am on record in a previous episode saying that The Wolverine was one of my favorite X-Men films. In reading this, reminded me of that feeling in watching the film. I already really enjoy a Tokyo setting regardless. So to get this Logan story in Japan and kind of this cast of characters that included the Silver Samurai and Viper, it was a lot of fun. And I'm glad that you mentioned the nod to how Viper or the Silver Samurai were involved in some tomfoolery with the New Mutants and they killed Karma.
Yeah, Shan is dead.
Damn, man. They like glossed over that super fast.
They killed her super fast. They really Thunderbirded her.
Maybe Chris thinks that's the magic formula. You need that early tragedy to happen to cement the team.
You pick one of them.
You roll a six-sided die, assign everybody a number.
And then you say, guess it was just bad karma. And you whip off your sunglasses.
Oof.
Staring into the camera. I feel like they could turn this into a good, like, they could make this like the second X-Men MCU movie, third movie. I don't think they'll want to, do that, but no, because they probably won't have Logan in the first one. This would be like a really good 6 X-Men movie.
This would even be like a cool thing to watch in like a cartoon. I think they did it in the original X-Men cartoon. I think they had an arc, because that's why we have that image of Logan sitting on the bed petting the photo of Mariko.
Are you sure it's her in that photo? I've seen a lot of other people in that photo. Is that not Jean's photo?
I don't know.
I swear it's a photo of Jean in the...
I'm pretty sure it's... I want to believe it's Mariko now. Yeah, I think you're right.
Know your meme. Wolverine crush. Yep, here's the origin. I'm watching it live. Yeah, it's Scott and Jean. Why is it both of them?
It's even funnier because Logan's fingers are like over top of Jean's face. So it almost looks like he's petting it for Scott.
Yeah.
I miss
and then you
Scott.
see Remy in a Speedo.
Hey, mon ami. What you doing over there, Logan? That was my really terrible Gambit impression.
I've heard worse. So in addition to all the physical action, there's a lot of other stuff going on too. Very dynamic issue. There's a lot of like subterfuge, trickery. We got people in costumes and disguises, people being mean to the waitstaff and knocking them out and taking their place. It's just a fun issue.
There's a lot happening, but it's very well thought out. You can get the feeling that Chris had a really fun time writing this and that the creative team as a whole enjoyed this, because everything is dynamic, from how it's drawn to the colors they're choosing, even like the shading to really kind of bring to life like these Yakuza outfits that are all black, and they're really kind of like bleeding blues into the outfits to bring out depth and color and make it seem more vibrant than probably what it could have looked like.
It seems like they spent a lot more time on this than they have like the average issue.
Yeah, because some pages are full of panels, maybe more than normal, I would say.
Strong detail.
Man, Jason Wingard's really going all out to mess with everybody, huh? Like
he really is.
He is all over the place.
So I think this issue pretty, not so subtly at this point, but hints that this Nabatone fellow is in fact Jason, or some sort of illusion conjured by him.
Yes.
I would say pretty strongly confirmed in the next issue as well. But I gotta say, I really like all of the little teases they've been doing with him. You know, like at the very start of all this, it wasn't clear that it was for sure him. At this point, it's very clear, but I love all the, like, it's mostly just like
It's subtle.
things happen and there's like a little bit of laughter in the background that a character thinks that they hear for like a second. It's very cinematic and something that you would expect to see like over like a season or half a season in like a TV show or something like that, where it's like this thing keeps happening. They're really teasing something up.
Yeah. I'm very curious to see where it's going. But on the surface, it feels like Sebastian Shaw got off the easiest.
Yeah.
Like
One would think he would.
he just heard laughing in the tunnels. And that was it. Emma is like comatose. Rogue had a bunch of trauma happen to her. A
Fled her home.
Raven's waking up with nightmares. We have this situation with Storms seeing the rising of the Phoenix and this explosion that happens. We'll talk about it in a minute here, but even what occurs with Logan, it's so personal.
I got some stuff on that for next time. Yeah, based on what happened in that, you know, the Hellfire Dark Phoenix saga area, he should be a lot more pissed at Shaw than he apparently is. I don't know.
Maybe he views Shaw as like a valuable partner ultimately, like he
really wants to get back to the Hellfire Club with him and Leland and weird robot guy.
Yeah. It's the only thing that would make sense to me. So what do? You take out Emma, who is, you know, wasn't even present when that happened, if I remember correctly.
This is her fault. She made my powers more powerful.
So, I mean, I'm curious to see what's going to happen with them. They're doing a good job carrying that story over. Just because I'm looking at this panel right now, I just wanted to highlight one of my favorite action sequences of this issue when they go and meet with the Silver Samurai and Viper. And I'm referring to Storm and Yukio. So Yukio jumps in and confronts Silver Samurai right away, and they're fighting. And so Viper is approaching this car, and she believes Mariko is inside. And she's like, this is weird. The fog is rising. This is so unusual. I've never seen this before. And it's like,
the fog doesn't exist in Japan.
Holding this gun, and it's just like, all right, Lady Mariko, get out like a good girl. The gambit failed. And suddenly gets whooshed across from the side of the car door, which looks like it falls off in the process. And she whacks her head, and who walks out of the car but Storm? And it has a great one line saying, quote, the gambit was Yukio's and is thus far proving most successful. And then laments that she didn't hear her because Storm knocked her out. It's a great sequence that ultimately leads to Storm firing the lightning and having to absorb it, which is a wicked cool looking panel. Like, it looks like her skin is like torched.
Well, I think she does say she's on fire, but she has kind of like a whole
because
magma vibe.
Yeah, and Yukio tries to put her out with Miriko's kimono. But even that bottom panel, like this giant explosion is so unlike what we typically see in X-Men comics. Like the way it's colored, it's shadowed, and you just see kind of like the silhouette of them like jumping. It's cool. I like it.
So one thing that we haven't touched on yet and didn't really make it into the plot recap, but for at least the scenes that do involve Logan, we kind of have this running narration through this issue and the next one where, you know, along with the dialogue between all the characters, we get a little bit more context. We get to hear some of Logan's thoughts and feelings about everything that's going on. It adds a lot to the story. I really enjoyed getting to spend some time. And it's always really fun when we have one of these stories and we do get more of the like a single person's perspective on everything that's going on.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, these 3 issues, and I think probably more so this one and the next one, they're really a tale of Storm and Logan, right?
And Rogue a little bit for the next issue, mostly.
Like a little, but she's just kind of like now in Kitty's old position, where we're going to just kind of like insert her to build up the name recognition. And, you know, we're going to team her up with Logan because everybody likes him. So we'll just have her go around and kick some ass with him. But I think like Storm and Logan kind of experienced the biggest character developments between all these issues. And you mentioned at the top of our episode how you felt that they could have done without this inclusion of the retelling of the Morlock situation. Because it just, you know, you could have just not included it and it probably would have been fine.
It was how the last issue ended.
So I felt a similar way about Scott in this issue, because I understand that they're trying to like continue this, pulling this thread with Madelyne and everything. But when you look at this as an overall story from a narration perspective, it's just kind of shoehorned in there to keep it relevant, even though the story that we're telling isn't even about Scott, like in this immediate situation, right?
Well, the B story is.
But there's no what's new? Nothing's new. There's there's no progression beyond. I went on a computer and confirmed it's.
I don't think the computers don't exist. Not a real computer.
A file.
There you go. I like the development that he is, you know, he's digging into this to an unhealthy degree, or at least like not to like not a healthy relationship type of degree. He's going into his grandparents' businesses, personnel files. You know, that's probably not cleared with HR. He's just, you know, but you know, he doesn't like what's going on. You know, something's bothering him. So instead of talking about it, he's just going to dig in like a crazy person. Alex tries to call him out. I think it sets the stage for more like him digging into this and not trusting the situation for what it is.
Fair.
I think there could be some payoff
I'm
for in issue 174, just judging by covers, but we'll see.
I fully expect there to be a payoff, and I will probably look back at this take very poorly. But for me, I could have taken this issue and the next one and had done this entire Japanese sequence without having to necessarily include that. Like, if we're going to have an issue to include it, you already talked about it in the issue before this. You could have like tacked on him going and looking at a personnel file. It's not a major grievance for me, but
Yeah, I feel you. I think it would be more fun if we were spending like more than one page and seeing like a little bit more of what was going on beyond just, I mean, it's fine as is, but I do really like getting to hang out with the B stories in this series. So it's funny how often Scott is the B story.
He's Mr. X-Men, man. There's no X-Men without him.
The B stories are just his relationship drama.
Yeah. As we all know, Scott likes to bounce around in his relationships, so there's a lot of drama to be had.
Issue 173 starts with Logan roughing people up for information. We then see a much more feral-looking Storm following Yukio's lead. No one will provide them with sanctuary as word is out on the death mark. Nabatone's estate is Wolverine and Rogue's next stop. She's careless, thinking she's invulnerable, but Logan saves her from getting blasted by a crazy laser. She jokes about giving him a kiss in reward, and Logan pushes her away, telling her to never pull a stunt or threat like that with him or another of the X-Men ever again, even as a joke. The two find Nabatone, but discover he's been dead over a week. It seems the Nabatone that Mariko met with was an imposter, but who could he be? Wolverine realizes they've been suckered and they start rushing back to the hospital. Yukio and Storm are beating up some lowlifes, and Storm notes that she's never used her powers to deliberately inflict pain before. Yukio says they'll probably think twice about mugging someone in the future, and Storm declares, "I think you're right. Whatever it means, this madness of yours that has infected me, I welcome it. And we see another thunderbolt come down from the sky. Back at the hospital, we see Viper and a group of ninjas. Rogue busies herself with the ninjas, while Wolverine and the Silver Samurai begin their duel elsewhere. The back and forth is pretty epic, but Mariko stops Logan from killing her half-brother. Viper appears with a gun, saying she'll fire if Logan doesn't back away. Silver Samurai begs Viper's forgiveness and collapses, saying he failed. In anger, Viper pulls the trigger. Logan attempts to push Mariko out of the way, but both of them are actually pushed by Rogue, who then takes the full blast of the laser gun. She's able to weather it until the gun overloads, but it's a fatal injury. Wolverine gives her his healing factor to save her life. A week later, we see Mariko walking the grounds when she comes upon a mysterious stranger who wishes her and her consort well. She seems to lose track of time and drops the flowers she was holding. She scolds herself for talking to herself like that. It's finally the day of the wedding and everyone gathers. Charles, Lilandra, Lorna, Alex, Corsair, Scott, and Maddie all fly in. Lilandra tries to strike down Madelyne, thinking she's Jean, but is held back and ends up apologizing. We then see Storm fly in. She's exchanged her usual outfit for a punk rock look and a mohawk. Kitty can't believe what she's done and storms off crying. Aurora is then shocked to see Madelyne, believing she was Jean at first. Kitty hands Maddie her pet as she's needed for the ceremony. Maddie is pretty weirded out to see a dragon when she expects a cat. She stares blankly into the distance, grabs Scott by the tie, and turns to him asking, just precisely who are these people and what the blazes have you gotten me into? The ceremony begins, but Mariko yells to stop the ceremony and there will be no wedding. Logan asks why and is told, you are not worthy. We see a tear run down his face as Mariko walks away, and we also see the unmistakable bottom half of Jason Wingard's face as he looks on with pleasure.
Once again, poor Logan was ready to get married. It seemed like they loved each other, and Jason just had to shove that dagger in. I feel so bad. He just damaged Wolverine in a way that no fight could ever damage him. Like he took the situation just to a whole nother level.
I really like what they've been doing with Jason here because I feel like his vendetta against the X-Men it has a certain sense of realism and pettiness that we don't always get to see. Like we see like Arcade capture loved ones and he's like a cartoon. And then we have this and it's like, oh, this has authenticity and just makes you go like, wow, this dude is a major asshole.
You know, like you saying it like that made me have the thought that this issue and these issues, especially this one and the one before it, the tone seems more adult in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Brood or aliens, whatever, that's space stuff. I feel like people can kind of suspend, you know, the differences, right? That's just whatever, science fiction. In this situation, like a lot of what has kind of unfolded, like this betrayal of Miracle at the altar to turn Logan down, like that is like a very possible thing that can happen. That happens to people. And it doesn't happen in this way, obviously, but it's messed up. And I think people can relate to that, you know, that feeling of heartbreak that Logan experiences here is such a human emotion. And you can really relate with him more than I think like most of the others who are being punished by Jason.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely gets, it seems, kind of the worst end of things so far.
He's definitely a bit of a petty bitch about the situation.
That's accurate.
Once again, though, the fight sequences in this issue are top-notch. Like the showdown with Logan and Silver Samurai. Oh, like no words needed. These panels are stunningly beautiful with these sword swipes from the Silver Samurai going up against Logan and the damage of the armor being sliced away. The sword being thrust through Logan's abdomen and him going to like slice his neck only for Logan to reverse. It's a great sequence of panels.
The duel was definitely a highlight. And I feel confident in saying that this is the best action sequence that we've seen drawn out in the X-Men comics so far. And I mean, like, even thinking about all the comic books I've read, this is the best, if not one of the best. Like, it's so dynamic, the all red background, the like hyper close up on the two at a time. It's super brutal. Logan gets stabbed multiple times. He takes a slash to the back of the neck that would decapitate a normal person. It's just wild. And then what I really love is right at the end, like, it's been all red background, and then Mariko catches his arm to stop him from killing him, and then like we have that like sharp transition to just like a white background. It's very artsy and cinematic.
Yeah, almost like he snaps out of the
berserker rage.
Yeah, and like, I don't want to call it that because I don't feel like he's being extreme here.
No, I wouldn't call it a berserker rage, but that's his kind of usual thing.
Yeah, they throw that term around at him quite often. Okay, so I mentioned to you that the situation with Storm in these 3 issues really got me thinking. And there's been a lot that's happened with her. And so I wrote down a cannabis-fueled retrospect of Storm. And I apologize to you and our listeners. But I hope...
How long is it going to be? I got to edit this bad boy.
It's not super long. I could talk super fast.
Bonus content.
Okay, so Chris, and I know you're listening, I firmly believe you must be a fan of wrestling, or wrestling is a fan of Chris, whichever way it's working, because...
Could be both.
You know, I can see this journey with Storm over the last 3 arcs. Okay, not the last 3 issues, the last 3 arcs, going back to the Brood. We are seeing a masterclass in taking a hero, right? Our babyface. We've talked about wrestling on this podcast before. We take our hero, Storm, and by the end of this, we are reinventing the character, like fresh. So to get there, we cover 5 key moments that feed into this metamorphosis that is unfolding with Storm. And the first one happens back in the Brood War. And Storm and Scott are against killing the Brood Queen. This had been, of course, typical up to this point. It aligns with the moral compass we have come to expect from Storm, the moral compass of Scott. Aurora was a survivor and she lost everything. And despite that struggle and the power she wields, she is chosen to be a hero, right? So in that initial sequence with the Brood, that was how she reacted. And that shifted when the Brood infection happens. And Storm, like everyone else, is reeling from this moment of clarity that Logan provides to everybody. And they're all dealing with this grief of knowing, oh my God, we're going to transform and turn into hideous alien monsters. They all handled it in very different ways. And the way that Storm goes about dealing with this is drastically different, right? She runs away from the team. She takes a ship and flees, essentially. And I think she does this for a lot of different reasons, right? She's panicking. She's fearing for her life. She's, I think, worried that this transformation is going to happen and she might attack her teammates. And she's also far from home, right? And I think during the Brood War saga and her being in space in general, she's talked about how cold it is and how lifeless and it, she feels out of place. And we get to a point where she literally begins a transformation in that story where she's on that ship. She's literally turning into her brood and then is saved by cosmic whales. So this is like the mark of the beginning of this character change, right? Because we literally see her in that story attached to the inside of the space whales. And her body literally doesn't have any skin. And she's like a projection of herself. And then she comes back later on and she's like rebirthed in a way. All right, so the next key moment happens back on Earth. And Storm is walking outside. It's the winter. And she's trying to commune with nature. This is something we've seen Chris bring into Storm's character many times, right? Like she feels at home in nature. And Chris makes a point to remind us that Storm's mutant powers prevent her from being directly harmed by the weather. And the justification for this, and I'm assuming this is the justification why she's nude all the time, right? Like, the fan service, but it all makes sense. It's all in her power set. Okay, so she's walking around and there's a storm approaching and a chilling gust strikes her, and they make a point of her teeth chattering and that she's cold, and she's denied this communion with nature. And this seems like a first for her. Like, this is her really, I think, beginning to recognize that something is different, something's off inside of her. She doesn't have control of her powers in the same way. There's a narration that happens in these panels, and it says, quote, even as she voices her anguished cry, she suspects the answer, and that realization chills her heart far more than the air does her bones. So she's coming to that realization that something is changing in her, and it's well underway, and she doesn't know what it is. Like, she can't commune with nature. All right, so let's pause here, because this moment is important, because we as the reader, just like those who would be in her crowd at a wrestling ring, and they've been following the story, and they know that she has overcome these great setbacks and she's scarred, and you start questioning, are we looking at, Storm becoming like Hollywood Hulk Hogan, where he comes back, goes in, you think he's going to help out his teammate, boom. No, he turns heel and everybody boos him. Thankfully, we're not going to get that. All right, so the next key moment comes from the misadventures with the terrible Morlocks, and Storm is now leading the X-Men. And I kind of alluded to some of this earlier, right? She's alone, Scott's gone, Logan's gone, she's leading them. We see that something is off, and now they are headed underground, and Kitty is taken at this point in time, and Kurt and Colossus are basically questioning Storm's decisions for, why aren't we going after Kitty? Why are we not looking for her? And Storm's basically like, we don't know where she is. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, we got to rescue Angel and we got to find Kitty. Like, we'll figure it out. But, you don't need to be questioning my actions here. And is really taken aback that her teammates are questioning her. Okay, so at this point, remember, she is kind of being led by her moral compass, right? And now we get to the showdown where she accepts this fight with Callisto. Her leadership skills have been questioned. She's all alone. Peter and Kurt are openly questioning whether she's bluffing. And then we get Storm basically having a unwavering victory over Callisto. Like, handles it very easily, strikes her down, stabs her in the heart, stands up, challenges all the other Morlocks to a fight if they feel like they can take her.
Who next?
And nobody stands up, right? So this is very extreme. It's shocking to see Storm act this way, right? Stabbing somebody in the heart. They've made it such a point of moral consequence for Storm that she's not looking to be taking lives. So something's changed. This is a huge change in her. So our next key event happens before heading to Japan, where we see her struggling to control her powers. This is when she's trying to build a little storm cloud to water her plants, and that goes haywire, and you have the Rogue situation unfolding. It's a very stressful time. They're just getting back from dealing with all this Morlock nonsense, and Charles is like, hey, get over here. I've done this interrogation. And she throws a blade, right, at the astral projection of Charles and blames him for bringing her into this situation, right? Like, this wasn't her choice to be doing this, but she's taken on this responsibility. And at several times we see her playing with this idea of, I yearn for the days when I didn't have the responsibilities that I have now. And Storm becomes very combative with Charles, which is very uncharacteristic of her, right? She's typically very diplomatic in her approach. If you think of how she acted with Charles, it wasn't super confrontational. It was, hey, I'm going to do a diplomacy check and try to persuade you into seeing my point of view when it comes to the value that Logan brings to our team, versus in this situation where he's like, hey, Rogue's going to be on the team now. And she just straight up says, no, she's like, that's not happening. And Charles plays his reverse Uno card and, all that nonsense kind of happens. So we then see her when Carol comes and confronts Rogue. And we have this standoff that basically happens where Carol's like, well, if this is how it's going to be, I'm not going to be part of this team. And Storm says the same thing. Like, it's me or her is essentially the ultimatum that she gives, and then backs down from it ultimately because Charles gives her his gaslighting answer for why they should trust her suddenly. Okay, so we've now have seen this transformation unfolding over several issues. I think it kind of breathes some extra life into those sequences and gives it some movement, right? Like, this all started back with the whales. All right, so our final key, and I think this is the most important one. So Storm is conflicted. She's not in control of her powers, and she's interacting with Yukio, who is a free spirit, who is acting as a Ronin, right? She believes she's a modern day Ronin. She's a samurai without a master and just kind of does her own thing and is careless and, really embraces the chaos that a fight can bring. Storm flirts with this idea of, wow, I really envy how carefree you are. And we get that fight between Yukio and Storm and Silver Samurai and Viper, and the big explosion that happens, and they get pulled out, and it's in that moment that Storm, I think, comes to a realization. She talks about how there needs to be inner serenity and harmony. Like, these are the aspects of nature that, like a babbling brook or walking through a quaint, quiet forest or something, right? Like, those have been the imagery that they've used for her up till now, right? Like, think of how her bedroom looked. It was full of plants. But now Chris has very cleverly taken the opposite side of this coin that nature represents, which is chaos, and it's wild and unpredictable. And, Mother Nature is just going to do its thing, right? And that's what we see end up happening. We see how she comes to accept that she isn't who she was before and reinvents herself with this look, right? She comes down to the wedding. She has the mohawk. She's confident now in herself. She's, toyed with this idea of, can I be Aurora who is compassionate and have this moral compass and be a good leader at the same time? Are these things mutually exclusive? Do I need to change who I am to be a thoughtful, determined, steadfast leader? And it seems to me like the answer is yes. Like, she's chosen like that leader path. Now, are we going to get there? I don't know. I kind of get the feeling like Storm's going to be entering kind of her badass phase, which is very fitting for the 80s, right? So
it is a badass new look.
This is ushering in this new version of Storm in a way that she's choosing. And I think that's the other theme here. She talks about how Charles has thrusted this responsibility on her. She's not wrong. She was living it up back home as a goddess who was worshipped by people. But Charles brought her forward to give her purpose and show her how great, mutant kind can be to the good of the world. And now she's have all this responsibility put on her shoulders. These are not choices that have been totally her own. And the same can be said about the brood eggs being implanted in her. And, this reincarnation that happens with the space whales, these are all events that are outside of her control. And this is her finally recognizing that she has to just be who she is. And now that's not serene and harmonious. It's this new version of Storm. And there you go. I think it all ties together, and Chris and the rest of the creative team have done like a splendid job of adding just like that edge to a character that was already exceptional, but by doing this have in a way reinvented her away from what we've experienced over the last, dozens of issues.
And I think one of the key early events that you may have glossed over as well is during the whole Brood thing, when she's aboard the ship and they're defending themselves from the attack, she lets loose with lightning. It comes out a little stronger than she expected. I think it's, something to do with like space powers interacting different. But I believe she ends up killing some of the Brood as well. And prior to that, not killing has really been like a big thing that she always goes on about, like her oath to never to take a life. And I think, that accidental killing, even if it was, Brood versus like a human, really kind of sets things in motion too, and just like continues when she realizes that there's the Brood within her, and then yada, 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 everything you just said.
Absolutely. And we even see Storm come and entertain this thought like even further, because they end up getting attacked, and she makes a point of saying, I've never used my powers to deliberately inflict pain. And Yukio responds by basically saying it was no less than they deserved and a far gentler fate than they had in store for us. And you can see her kind of like embracing this concept that, yeah, you know what? I maybe I could be teaching a little bit more of a lesson with the use of my powers and just kind of letting go, not being not so uptight, She's letting loose. So I think they all did an exceptional job, and I didn't really appreciate it as much in those moments, but like coming to this point, which I think is the payoff, is we're really kind of getting a changed Storm, and it's a character development that has played out over those 3 arcs and really has come to a head now.
So you've touched on Storm, who is one of the stars of the show of these 3 issues. The other 2 who really are showcased during this issue in particular, Rogue and Wolverine, I really enjoyed their little buddy cop adventure.
Me too.
I like the development. It starts with him being very reluctant, untrusting of her. He doesn't want her to come along. He's very like, I guess, whatever, takes her under his wing. And I mean, to Rogue's credit, she seems very eager to prove herself as a real member of the team. She even ends up taking a fatal shot that's meant for Logan and Mariko right at the end. And I'm curious, like, when are we going to see this being tested further? Like, it's one thing to do it in this situation. It's another when it's like they're up against Mystique and Rogue has to betray her family for her new family or something like that. And I really hope that from here, everyone was sidelined in this issue. And I'd like to see Logan vouching for Rogue a little bit if the others are still going to be, and I mean, realistically, they should be carrying on their distrust of Rogue because they weren't here. They didn't see what she all did. So I think we're setting ourselves up. This story is really good on its own. Like, these are just like grade A issues, but it also does like such a good job of just like setting us up for so much good future stuff.
Yeah, I think it helps that this was, and I don't say this lightly, low stakes, right? This was them traveling to their friend's wedding and a crazed Yakuza boss basically trying to take hold of the empire that was given to her sister, which is a tale that we've already had in the X-Men with the Shi'ar. But I think because it's happening on such a smaller scale in a centralized place like Tokyo and like this very specific setting, it feels a lot different and grounded compared to what we've seen in the space stuff prior to now.
Street level crime instead of galactic crime.
And I think it's a huge benefit, like grounding it in that way. And, I feel like some characters who typically would have been a challenge to kind of write around here, I think by eliminating them with the poison, I'm talking about like Colossus and Kitty and Nightcrawler, I think really allowed Chris to include Rogue in a more meaningful way than just having the situation that occurred with Carol that I was so judgmental about
She's in the background on a yacht.
Yeah, here she is.
Here she is in the background on an island.
Here she is, not doing anything. But don't worry, there's a payoff, baby.
So this feels like, to me, the best the X-Men has been for a while now. Really love this arc, despite, maybe some issues of really some denseness. Overall, great action, great development. Logan acting as a mentor for Rogue. I think there's some real potential for him to help Storm as well, to, going through everything that she's going through. But also maybe now he won't be able to, because he won't really be in the correct frame of mind. Logan's running narration in the last 2 issues was, a big bonus for me. And what happens to him from here? This is a crushing thing to happen. In many ways, Mariko was like his, the way that he could show his softer side, kept him more grounded in his humanity versus giving into his rage. Both him and Storm, could end up becoming more wild, and things could get real intense on the team. I think we can expect things to ramp up from here as well. I mean, we can see the cover of the next issue is heavily featuring Mastermind, Jason Wingard, along with Scott and Maddie. His vendetta against the X-Men, as I've said, like the pettiness is, it brings a whole nother level of things to me. Really excited for how things are going to play out from here. First issue was a little slower, a little softer. My goodness, what do? I feel so positive, but I wrote down to give like the group of these like an 8. But that the last 2 would probably both score like an 8.5 for me. I'm just gonna score the whole as 8.5. It feels right.
I feel like I already went on a big tangent. My cannabis-infused ramblings of why I love Storm.
Do you want me to copy and paste it
in these issues? So I'll keep this nice and short. I agree with everything you said. I think there's a lot of payoff. I want to look at these as a trio as well. I think they stand out, all 3. I wasn't expecting them to be what they were, but I walked into this pretty blind as to what these issues were going to be about. And for that reason, it was a glorious and happy surprise. And I think I agree with your rating. An 8.5 is well deserved.
That does it for this episode of Uncanny Book Club. Thanks for listening, and we hope to see you next episode where we'll discuss issues 174 and 175.
Ciao.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Uncanny Book Club. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or share with a friend.